The wines of Australia and Australian viticulture. Australia is a hot and dry country. It's actually a big concern right now because they're going through a drought that's been lasting for something like a decade. And it's concerned as to whether or not Australia will be able to continue to make wine the way they do now. If you look at Riverina and Riverland, these two regions make 40% of all the wines made in Australia, and those will not support grapes without irrigation. And with the droughts that have been going on lately, it's been a big deal. Australia is known for its technical prowess in making wine. You've heard of the flying winemakers? That started in Australia. The idea of a flying winemaker is that you have the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, and they do their harvest 6 months apart. So, like a lot of times you hear about the French winemakers going to, say, Argentina or Chile and bringing their expertise with them there to make the wines for their harvest season. Well, this started in Australia, where the Australian winemakers who were starting to come into prominence would then come north to California or whatever and teach them about wine. The reason that they have such technical skills is because, first of all, they have a low population compared to the size of their wine industry, so they don't have cheap labor. They don't have any Mexicans to pick the fields, anything like that. So they use machines to do it. I mean, I don't mean that in a racist way. That's what we do. I mean, we have a slave culture that raises our fruit force, and they tend to be largely non-English speakers and from a particular place. I'm not saying that in any kind of ethnic slur. But because of that, they have a lot of expertise in using machinery to do their harvesting. And that helps to create a consistency in their wine, kind of like what you see in California. Also, because they have so much wine growing land, they can choose the wines. In most places, what you're looking for is for that really small little area. Like you go to Burgundy, and it's like, okay, where's your chateau? Okay, my chateau's from here to here. And that's my grapes, and that's how they do it there. In Australia, because there's so much land, they go far and wide to pick the best grapes from a lot of different regions to put them into one bottle. One of the biggest selling wines of Australia, one of the biggest names, is the Grange by Penfolds. We're doing Penfolds 2 quarters from now, but their big one's called the Grange. It goes from like $300 a bottle. And basically the way they made that wine sell for prices like that in the 50s when it came out was by going around and picking the best Shiraz and the best Cabernet Sauvignon from all over Australia, not just from one little tiny region, because that one tiny region couldn't necessarily give them what they needed. So Australia is all about technology and breadth. They grow warm climate grapes with lots of irrigation on flat land. You don't get a lot of that up and down hilly stuff you see in France or whatever, because if you have machines to harvest this stuff, so when they're planting them, they're not going to put them on the side of a mountain. I mean, there are pictures I've seen of wineries, not wineries, but vineyards, where I would be afraid to stand on this vineyard because the slope is so steep. It's like a vertical drop, and like you might hit a vine or two on the way down. That's not the way it is in Australia. It's all flat lands. They put machines in there to grow the grapes, and they think about that part of it from the beginning of the winemaking process all the way to the end. It's not just something that's like, oh, now it's time to pick the grapes. What are you going to do? What else about Australia? They're the 4th largest exporter of wine to the world, behind Italy, France, and Spain. I told you about their problems with their with the heat and their droughts. Maybe a little bit of a mixed blessing, because they also have a problem with overproduction. They're producing so much wine that it's driving the prices down, almost to the point where it's starting to become a question of whether it's worth it to make wine or not. And as the wine regions are starting to dry up and become smaller and smaller, it's going to mean that fewer people will be able to produce wine. So that might help with that problem. Lastly, unlike anywhere in Europe, when phylloxera came through, you guys who've been here a long time or probably hear me tell you what that's about. Phylloxera is a louse, a type of bug that lives in the roots of grapes. And when we started cross-pollinating, when they started bringing wine from Europe to America and back, this phylloxera, which grows on American roots, got to Europe and just started wiping out vineyards one after the other, where they thought it might be the end of wine in Europe for about 100 years ago. The way they solved this problem was that they discovered that the American rootstock had developed a immunity to this phylloxera, so they grafted the rootstock from America onto the European grapes. So when you have a European wine, most of the time it's going to be a European vine on an American grapes, on an American root, because all the others got wiped out. In Australia, somehow they managed to avoid that. About two regions got wiped out by the phylloxera, and then they just beat it back. So the grapes, the vines they have in Australia are some of the oldest vines in the world, 150 years old. And that's getting to the point where, a big vine might produce 2 grapes, and that creates, some people believe it creates an intensity, because as the vines get older and older and older, they produce less and less and less fruit, using the same amount of resources, which means that some people believe that there's going to be more concentrated and things like that. So that's another thing that Australia is going for, is these old 150-year-old vines that can do things that nowhere else in the world can really do. That's all we got for you right now. I'm sorry.